Hey there, good noon and welcome to BYJU'S exam prep channel that is dedicated to taking care of all the aspects of your B school entrance exam preparation. As in fact you can see right now we are talking about XAT. So your preparation is not just about the CAT, it also goes ahead and tackles all these other exams, and we here at BYJU'S are committed to taking you through every other aspect of every other exam as well. So if you happen to have any questions which are that specific, feel more than free to share those with me right now, and I would love to help you with that too. And who do we have here now? Who all do we have today? Hi Priyanshi, Akash, Sonali. Do you have any specific questions about that? Something specific that I can help you with? Is there something in particular that bothers you more about the XAT and you think that you would like to know a little more about it? Hey Priyanshi, Akash, Sonali, do you have any specific questions? So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about what we can do over the period of next 80 odd days in order to perform really well at verbal and logical ability section of the XAT. So, different exams happen to have different labels for their English section. So the CAT guys call it VARC and the NMAT will call it language and blah, blah, blah. And then XAT will call it verbal and logical ability, whatever it is. At the end of the day, we are talking about all those things that are either directly English or are dependent on English. Now, okay, Akash, 5 years gap. See, a gap of 5 years would usually make it challenging for you in the interview. So it is not that you will not be taken in, but as long as you can justify it in the course of the interview, as long as you have some sound, solid reasons, you definitely have a possibility of getting in. So as I generally say, B schools do not decide to select or reject you on the basis of just one factor. It is usually a combination. So as long as you can take care of those rest of the things in that combination, as long as you can deliver excellence in each one of those other parameters, I don't see a single factor going ahead and overshadowing you. Okay, and since you are using the term depression, I think that's a clinical term, right? And I think this is not a right platform to dish out medical advice, but it'd be a good idea to at least seek that if you indeed have clinical depression. Okay, Varad, that is something that we are going to talk about. So let's dive in. So before I take you through that, our window of the last All India Open mock for this year is open. The exam, the window opened yesterday, and if you have not attempted the test yet, make sure that you register for it at the earliest, sit for it and let those percentiles guide you further. And here is a thought that I want to put in your mind before we move on. Practice puts brain in your muscle. So we exercise. Those of us who are serious about our health and fitness, we would typically engage in some exercise every day because that's how you become stronger. That's how you go on to become better. Your brain is also somewhat similar. When you practice in a structured manner, your brain also grows and becomes more powerful, becomes more acute, more suitable, sharper for all of these aptitude exams. So keep doing that, and you will need it now that you are thinking about XAT. So here is an overview. First up, the paper pattern itself. So you know that you're preparing for the CAT, which is a 2-hour exam, and it's not even a single exam. In the case of CAT, I can actually say that CAT puts you through 3 40-minute tests, one after the other without any break. So CAT is actually 3 different 40-minute exams that are conducted one after the other. XAT happens to be different. How? Have a look for yourself. So XAT has this part 1 and part 2. Your score, your performance in part 1 determines whether you are called in for the next round or not. and your score of part 2 is then taken into account only later. So unlike CAT, which is 3 40-minute exams stacked one after the other, in XAT you have 2 parts, 2 papers. Now part 1 has your English, has this entirely new section called decision making, and then all your quant and DI questions are clubbed together into a single section. So for those of us who are who think that, hey, quant is not my strength, that is not an area that I am most comfortable with, XAT is an exam where the proportion of those things is relatively low. Moreover, there is no sectional time limit, which means that you can choose to spend the time wherever, in whichever way. So you have these 175 minutes which depend completely on your discretion, right? So what is new here, apart from some of the obvious things that you see? What is new about XAT? So let us see. The very first thing that is new about XAT is the difficulty level. So usually we say that XAT, particularly in terms of English, has a higher difficulty level. Although if I were to compare it to CAT 22, I would say that CAT 22 was almost at par with the XAT. But usually when you go ahead to write XAT, you should expect a higher difficulty level, especially in terms of English. The second difference is the duration. Right? So you just saw the duration, right? 175 minutes instead of 120 minutes. So you have more time, and moreover you have this decision making section which is new. There is no sectional time limit, and therefore you have that discretion. So in such a scenario where there is no sectional time limit, it has some advantages. You can choose to spend more time on the area that you know you are more comfortable with, more confident about, and thus you can maximize your score. On the other hand, question selection becomes more important. Choosing the right kind of questions, letting go of the questions, all those things would once again become important, would become crucial. In the CAT, you have 4 options for every question, but in these exams, okay, XAT, NMAT, Maharashtra CET, you typically get 5 options. So I think in terms of approach, 5 options do not make any difference, but it does require a bit of getting used to. So when you practice enough questions, you do get used to that. So that's another important element. Then the marking scheme is also a little different. So it is +1 and -0.25. Moreover, there is no negative marking in GK. But then, unlike the CAT, unlike for that matter any other exam in India, in Indian B schools, they actually have a penalty for leaving questions as well. So for the first 8 unattempted questions, they are okay with that, okay, you could not attempt 8, all right. But any question that you leave unattempted after that leads to a penalty of -0.1. So that at times start playing on people's mind. That makes them feel that, oh, out of 76 questions, I can leave 8. So it means that I definitely need to attempt 68 questions. That's not necessarily the case. I am of the opinion that if you're clueless about a question, it's better to leave it than to attempt it, because if you attempt it and get it wrong, it's actually going to be -0.25. So things get balanced out, right? So that's what is new. And coming specifically to the VARC section, or the verbal and logical ability section, as the XAT guys would call it, what do we have here? So let's dive deeper into the world of verbal and logical ability. So first up, there is no sectional time limit. But that said, I normally recommend that you mentally keep a sort of time limit for every section that you go ahead and attempt. And I'll talk about this later, but then There is no sectional time limit, but you need to have that mental clarity that I will move out after this much time. The total number of questions that you get are 26. What is the breakup of the questions? Let me take you through the last 2 years of XAT. So in XAT 22, this is exactly what we had. So it'll give you an idea of what all gets asked. So you had reading comprehension, you had poem comprehension. So there was one poem that had 2 questions. You had para jumbles, 2 questions. You had 3 questions that were based on grammar. You had some fill in the blank questions, and you had some critical reasoning questions. And similarly, if I move over to XAT 23, all these things remained the same. There was some tiny recomposition happening in the section. So you still had the same number of RCs, same number of para poem comprehension, but then we had one para completion question available as well. So there was a paragraph where they asked us for a logical continuation. So in a way, you can treat it as a paragraph with a blank given to you at the end. So you had those 2 + 1 questions of these 2 categories. Then we had 3 grammar based questions, 1 fill in the blank. So they gave us 1 sentence with 4 blanks and we were supposed to answer it. And there were 5 critical reasoning questions. So now if you compare it to the CAT, what all is new? What all is turning out to be new now? So can I say that poem comprehension is something that is new? So that's one new part. Then grammar. Oops, that turned out to be a bit too dark. So let's move back to something lighter. So grammar, then vocabulary, and then direct CR questions. So I would generally not say that CR is something which is new. You are supposed to prepare for it even for your CAT exam, but the CAT does not ask you direct critical reasoning questions, or at least they have not been asking direct CR questions of late. But in the XAT exam, you will encounter some direct critical reasoning questions as well. So here are these 4 additional elements that you need to prepare for. So let us pick them up one by one. So to begin with, let's talk about XAT RCs. Now, when it comes to the reading comprehension section in the XAT, I'd say this is one section which is conceptually closest to the CAT. So more or less, it's just like the CAT, except for the fact that the difficulty level may be a little higher. But apart from that, there are a couple of differences. Yes, the first difference is that you get smaller passages. So in fact, I started preparing for the CAT and started teaching for the CAT when the passages used to be rather lengthy. I remember the year when I used to prepare for the CAT exams, we had to be prepared for around 1000 word passages. From there, we are talking about today where you have around 500 word passages in the CAT exam. And if you talk about XAT, they are going to be smaller still. So it's absolutely normal to see a 250-300 word passage in XAT. So to that extent, I would say reading speed does not play as big a role in XAT as it would typically play in the CAT. So the questions are smaller. And then every passage is typically followed by 3 questions each. So if I talk about the CAT, we get 4 passages with 4 questions each. That's the pattern for the last few years. In the XAT, if you look at it, you still get 4 passages, but this time around you would have 3 questions each. So the passage is smaller, yes, but then they're also taking out 1 question and therefore things balance out there. So that's one important difference. The second important difference is that in XAT you also see a poem comprehension section, a poem comprehension segment always. So they typically give you 1 poem, then that 1 poem is followed by 2 questions. Traditionally, I've seen over the years that one of those questions is easy, whereas the other one can only be answered by those who have truly understood that poem. So as far as RC passages go, I don't think you need to do anything different for that. Stick to whatever you have been doing for the CAT and you should be fine. But if you want to excel at poem comprehension, you need to now start reading a bit of poetry. Then my recommendation will be that, hey, read one poem every day. Just pick up any short poem, and don't confine yourself to a single author or a single genre, okay? Just Google, or maybe you can set up a membership, a subscription to any place which can send you a poem every day, and I just want you to read it. But here are a couple of extra things that I'd say. The first one is that read it aloud. Unlike the passages where I ask you to zip the lip and then read, when it comes to poetry, I generally ask you to read it aloud because every poem has a rhythm, a tempo. When you read it aloud, you are able to attune yourself to that rhythm and that tempo. And then don't treat it merely as a poem that you're reading for RC. Okay? Read it to feel it. The poet at the end of the day wants to create a particular emotional climate, emotional weather inside of the reader. Now, the poet obviously did not write that poem thinking that, oh, someday the B school exams will use me as a passage. No, right? So read it to feel it. So do that every day and don't rush through it. Right? So maybe you would spend 10, 15, maybe even 30 minutes, and that's absolutely okay. But mostly if you spend 10-15 minutes with that poem, you should be fine. Additionally, you know that the poetry uses a lot of literary devices which are also known as figures of speech. So learn more about figures of speech for 2 reasons. Number 1, it will help you understand the poems better. And number 2, there are times when they ask us direct questions based on figures of speech. They can pick up a sentence and they can ask you for the figure of speech used in that sentence. For that matter, even Snap guys can ask it, and therefore it is doubly important. And then learn to deal with allusions. Allusions are indirect references. In poetry, you'd see, especially in olden poetry, poets will not talk about things directly. They will use those indirect references, they'll use those symbolisms to convey what they truly want to convey. So a poet is unlikely to tell you or unlikely to say that, hey, I'm lonely. He'd rather he'd rather paint the picture of a moon where he'd say that the moon was wandering companionless through the night sky. You see that? So that symbolism tells you that the author is feeling lonely, right? Or there was this poem of Wordsworth that I read back in school, which talked about my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. So you notice this part. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. So here that rainbow is a symbol of hope. That rainbow is not just a sight to behold, it's not just a lovely sight to look at it. This symbolizes the childish wonder, the childlike wonder. That symbolizes the curiosity. This symbolizes that you need to remain in awe of the beauty of nature, and if you cannot do that, you'd rather die. So it's that important an ability. So he could have straight away said that, hey, remain aware of the beauty of the nature, but no. Instead of that, when you say, so be it when I shall grow old or let me die, You convey it more beautifully, right? So those kind of things, yeah. So you typically have symbolism, and you of course need to go ahead and work with that symbolism. let me take up a couple of messages. What proof मैं दिखाऊं उनको? आकाश, किस चीज का proof? भाई proof किस चीज का, मतलब फिर तो बता पाऊंगा मैं किस, what kind of proof we are talking about. Jack Ryan, साला सीजन नहीं देखा यार मैंने सीजन 2 ही मैंने I just watched 2 seasons, and that you remind me of the fact that there are more seasons to go through. Yes, they gave NMAT, got 241. The breakup looks decent. Actual exam was way easier than BYJU'S mocks. यार हम भी आसान करते हैं लोग, no? People start cribbing that it is easy, they won't believe in those mocks. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's let us see what the cutoff goes for this year. Let's keep those fingers crossed. Good luck to you. You can share a little more about the exam, which others can actually find useful. Okay, so anyhow, so this is what I want you to do for the poem comprehension part, and I'm sure if you do that, by and by, over a passage of time, you should feel more and more confident. And now coming over to XAT grammar. So XAT of late has been asking questions that are built around error identification. So typically what they do is that they give us 5 or 6 sentences. Then there are 5 options that combine some of those sentences, and they ask you to choose either those sentences that are correct or those sentences that are incorrect. One and the same thing, right? In terms of approach, things won't change. So you're supposed to choose an option which gives you all the sentences that are grammatically correct, or an option which gives you all the sentences that are grammatically incorrect. And if we look at it historically, the kind of areas that have been asked more prominently in the error identification segment have been areas like prepositions, very important for that. Then tenses. So tenses along with all its glory. Okay, so tenses, and an extension of tenses is conditional sentences, right? Irregular verbs, causative verbs, all of these are areas that are linked with tenses. So make sure that you have mastered each one of these things. Then subject verb agreement, very important for all the B school exams. Then articles, using a, an and the correctly. And mind you, prepositions, articles can at times get very tricky. Then there can be questions based on idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs. And last year, they even had a dedicated question to test our understanding of punctuations. So punctuations can get tricky because in order to master those, you need to master the foundations of grammar. But then I hope that I've made your life easy by telling you that, hey, focus on these areas more. So how do you go about it? My suggestion is revise grammar. And I'm saying revise grammar because, right from the first day we have met, the very first session of verbal ability strategy that I've taken you through, I have been very clear about the fact that we are supposed to study grammar. We are not supposed to leave it for the end. And you being an excellent student, you being Biba Bacha, I'm sure you must have done whatever I have asked you to. In case you haven't, then my recommendation will be that, okay, start here. At least go through these areas. And let's not forget that you are also supposed to practice error identification. So make sure that you practice a lot of mixed bag questions. When we study grammar for the first time, we go through a lot of questions which are segregated by topics. That, okay, I'm working on tenses, so tense based questions, article based questions. In the exam, they won't announce it, right? They won't tell you which area to focus on, with a possible exception of the last one where they told you that you are supposed to punctuate it correctly. You normally do not. So mixed bag questions become very important. So here is a question from XAT 23 for you. Why don't you go ahead and answer this question? So the question gave us 6 sentences with an instruction that read these 6 sentences carefully, which is, I think, not even necessary. You'd already read these carefully. And then they said that, okay, choose the option which contains all the correct sentences, and these were the options given to us. So go ahead, give it a shot and tell me what your answer is. Take 30 seconds, 40 seconds, whatever you need, and then we'll talk about it. So answers, guys, answers. Okay, so Sonali has picked up one. What about the rest? Jack Ryan, you have performed really well in NMAT. How about giving this question a shot now? Okay, so let's see. Let's work on it together. Sentence 1. The exam will begin from 2 p.m. on January 8th. Any issues here? So I'm writing a sentence. Okay. You tell me what the difference between these two is. I will study from Monday versus I will study on Monday. What is the difference between these two sentences? I've just changed a preposition. Any difference? So when we say I will study from Monday, what does it mean? I'll study on Monday. So this action of studying, it is saying this action of studying will happen on Monday, it will happen on Tuesday, it will happen on Wednesday, Thursday, every day thereafter. On the other hand, if I say I will study on Monday, then we are saying that this action will happen only on this particular day. Right? So you're getting the difference between from and on in this context. Now tell me something. What should I say? I will start studying from Monday or on Monday. Which one will you choose? In this particular case, which one of the two will you choose? I will start studying from Monday, I'll start studying on Monday. So see, the action now is starting something, and you notice starting can happen only on one day. If you've started on Monday, you cannot start on Tuesday, you cannot start on Wednesday because you've already started, right? And from tells you that the action will be repeated every day thereafter. So in this context, from is wrong, it has to be on. So we say I'll start studying on Monday. So you notice some actions cannot be repeated. Now, why am I talking about these? Sentence number 1 talks about something that begins. Now, beginning can happen only once. Thereafter, you can only have continuation, you cannot begin. So, from tells you that it will happen, that will keep on happening after 2 p.m. But then you cannot begin after 2 p.m. You've already started. So, instead of from, you need something that talks about that specific point of time. So, for a day, the preposition is on. For a time, the correct preposition is at. So, first is incorrect, which means that any option that gives you first can be ruled out. Then look at fifth. Amitabh Bachchan is, you're not married with somebody, you're married to somebody. Fifth is also incorrect. So any option that involves fifth can also be eliminated. What are we left with now? 3, 4 and 6. You notice? That's how I just used the process of elimination and I could arrive at it. So there you go. So that's the kind of competency that you need to work towards. Okay, then coming to critical reasoning. So you should expect a good 5 odd critical reasoning questions. But unlike exams, unlike NMAT or for that matter Maharashtra, CT, CMAT, etc., all the questions in XAT are your typical paragraph based critical reasoning questions. They mostly center around these 4 question types. They'll ask you for identifying the assumption or identifying the inference or strengthening or weakening, where inference is probably the most important one. Right? So these 4 question types are the one that you absolutely need to master. So how do you master it? Revise your sessions. So I'm sure by now you have gone through critical reasoning in your classes, or if you're studying on your own, maybe through some videos, some book, right? So whichever tool that you use, you can use that tool to revise it. And then at this juncture, I'd suggest that you start moving towards practicing more and more questions. And if you get any of those questions wrong, then you'd be able to diagnose any problem that exists. And thereafter, if you combine it with this revision, these 2 things together should take care of your issues, your challenges, right? Once again, I think most of you preparing for the CAT have already gone through critical reasoning, and so I'd not spend much time on it. The approach is more or less similar or to the one that has been taught to you in the paragraph based CR classes. Then we have this next area, this next bit called vocabulary. So in the XAT exam, you typically are not asked direct vocabulary questions. So you won't get these synonyms and antonyms and all that. They, for the last few years, have been confining themselves to this question type called sentence close, or which is popularly called fill in the blank questions. So for the last couple of years, they've given us one sentence. That sentence had 4 blanks, and we needed to choose the appropriate word for each one of those 4 blanks. This question for the last 2 years can easily be termed difficult, and difficult because it combines a lot of different elements. It requires you to have the knowledge of the meanings of all the words that are given to you. Then it also expects you to comprehend, it expects you to use your logic. It to a certain extent also expects you to be spot on with your grammar, and additionally there are times when even collocation plays a role. So that these things make the questions rather challenging. Let's have a look at one. So here is a question for you. Why don't you go through it and tell me what you think the answer should be. So instead of 4 blanks, I'm giving you one with just 2 blanks, but I hope you'd be able to do justice to it. So go ahead, attempt it and tell me what you think. Done. So let us see, what do we have here now? If the chief source of our moral judgments is our own experience first and then the opinions of our family, both being far more important than, can I say, considering that we are talking about experience and opinions, far more important than opinions of the pious? So I need something like opinions. So what can I put in? Can persuasion go in the first blank? No. Expulsion? No. Preaching? Yes. Exhortations? Yes. Because exhortations also mean that you are trying to encourage someone through your words to do something. So going purely by the first blank, A and B can be eliminated. Let's focus on the second. So if the chief source of our moral judgment is our own experience first and then the opinions of our families, both being far more important than the preaching or exhortations of the pious, this adds credibility to the fears of what kind of slope? Can it be a vital slope? That does not even make sense. Vital is something which is critical, absolutely necessary. So that makes no sense. There's no meaning that arises out of it. So vital can be ruled out. Slippery slope, that can fit in. Slippery slope is a very well established expression where a slippery slope means that once you put a foot on it, you'll not be able to turn back. You'd keep falling deeper and deeper into this world. So for instance, I've been trying to lose weight of late. Okay, pandemic has hit me hard and I'd gone out of shape, and then you end up sitting for such a long time here on the chair that it's understood. It's obvious that you would go ahead and increase the weight. But you know what? I thought that I will focus on diet and exercise. So I remained focused on diet for a long while. But then one fine day, somebody offered me a piece of cake because it's a birthday party. And I said, okay, I'll just have this one slice and then I'll exercise caution. But that one slice, my God, once I had that one slice, my resolve weakened and I ended up having a lot of other party food. And it has happened thrice with me. There's this popular शेर, it says, सिर्फ एक कदम उठा था गलत राह शौक में, मंजिल तमाम उम्र मुझे ढूंढती रही. So वो एक कदम पहला derail कर देता है. So that's what a slippery slope is. एक कदम और फिर वापस ही नहीं आ पाओगे. डाइट में एक बार ले लो ये सोच के कि नहीं आधा बिस्किट ही लूंगा, थोड़ा सा केक ही लूंगा, थोड़ी सी रसमलाई खाऊंगा. Man, so since then I realized that hey, no. It's a slippery slope. If you can stop yourself at that first bite itself, then it's great. Otherwise, it becomes challenging. It becomes a slippery slope. So slippery does go, and therefore D should be the best answer for us. So you notice this is the kind of ability that we need to bring in. And just to wrap it all up, when it comes to XAT, VA and logic, apart from preparing for each one of these areas, I would recommend that you also start working on your test taking strategy. So my general suggestion is that for these 26 questions, you need to take out some 45 minutes. So attempt these 26 questions in 45 minutes. It's not necessary for you to attempt everything. Focus on question selection, pick and choose, but then think of these 45 minutes as your first round of the verbal and logical ability section. And so focus on question selection, attempt only those questions that are very easy for you. And once you have gone through this first round, then you focus on maximizing the score. So what you typically do is that, okay, you spend 45 minutes to verbal, then I'd say that, okay, spend 40 minutes to decision making, then spend another 45, 48 minutes to quant DI. So in total, you've ended up spending around 132 to 135 minutes. You are still left with 35-40 more minutes. So in those 35-40 minutes, you need to maximize your score. And now, because you have looked at the entire paper, you know which area, which section you need to come back to. So if that section happens to be verbal, come back to verbal and ace it. Come back to verbal and maximize your score. So stay focused on identifying your strengths vis-a-vis all of these different question types, so that question selection becomes easy and so that your first round of attempt goes very smoothly, very productively. So that's what I brought for you today. Please don't forget that you're supposed to write the All India mock at the earliest, and for even more practice, you can join me at 7 p.m. today. I'm the one who's taking the session today, so we'll be focusing on para jumbles at 7 p.m. In our series called CAT 23 Crash Course. For even more practice, you can enroll for a test series and go through 10,000 questions and more than 80 mocks. Besides, if you're facing issues in some specific areas, some specific chapters, and you want to review their concepts once, go ahead, unlock your free 3-day trial and attend those topics so that your learning gets enhanced. And if you do that, I won't be surprised if I see you here getting excellent percentiles. So if you liked working with me, don't forget to press the like button, and that's where I'll stop today. But until I see you at 7 p.m, keep working hard. Take care. Have a great day ahead.